Oh. Oh, Yuta versus Kashimo, huh? What's up, guys? I'm here, and we want to do a breakdown / live reaction and review to Restless Gamblers. Yuta versus Kashimo is completely one-sided, and yeah, yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh we got a lot to talk about. Oh, we know we got a lot to talk about. So we aren't gonna waste any more time. Let's just up right into it. Oh, sweet mother of mercy, editing me, wake up! Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, I yap extensively, quite long form, dare I say, myself. And trust me, I know myself quite well. So I warn you, here and now, if you'd like to see this video without my domain expansion, Horizon of the Captivating Yapper, unleashed at full force all over this video, please do me a favor, if you will, and go check out the link to Restless Gambler. It'll be in the description down below, along with a link to the original video without all my yapping. But with that disclaimer out the way, let's do a little yapping about this hypothetical battle. Now, I'm going to do Yuta versus Kashimo soon. I mean, I don't really need to wait anymore. I really don't need to wait anymore. But to give a hypothetical discussion, there's a very... The thing is, right, you are going to have to take Kashimo out of character to round start it. Because he needs to use his technique, right? But he wouldn't use his technique on Yuta. He wouldn't. Because it's not Suguna. But, like, say hypothetically we revive Kashimo and Yuta gets up for one reason or another, and we make them fight, and Kashimo uses his technique. If Yuta opens domain, Kashimo loses. Like, that's the main thing. Domain Yuta is what makes it really, really difficult. Kashimo has enough stats that if you do, like, some solid narrative stuff, you can make pretty decent arguments that he one-shots Yuta. Like, if he puts one of his palms to Yuta's face, and Yuta doesn't pull a Sukuna and cage 2 reversal out the way, then Yuta perishes. Because he's being irradiated and vaporized from the brain down. And I don't think he can RCT through that. And while Rika is powerful, Rika is speedy, Rika is fast, I think she is also a light speed attack victim. So there is that. I'm not saying it's impossible for Kashimo to win. But knowing Kashimo, if we take both of these characters in character, I just think it's pretty... Like, it's the question of, like, how many hits does it take to get to the center of a Yuta pop? Right? Because, like, if we go with just pure AP, Kashimo's bolts should be able to do damage to Yuta. Serious damage. And while we know Yuta's RCT speed is high, we know it's not on the caliber of Gojo, we know it's not on the caliber of Sukuna, and we know it's definitely not on the caliber of Hakari. So say, hypothetically, Yuta and Kashimo get into an exchange, and let's say it takes Kashimo 4 hits to get a bolt off, right? If that bolt hits anywhere lethal on Yuta, like hypothetically on his arm, or on his other arm, or on his head, heaven forbid, or his stomach, or torso, Yuta's going to be disabled. But that doesn't account for Rika, and Rika's seeming perfect ability to just kind of ignore damage for the most part. Like, especially when fully manifested, she's able to take hits from Ryu Ishigori, and like, if you consider the rebound of Kashimo's lightning bolts, you know, comparable to Curse energy output, and Ryu has the highest in history, specifically noted in a period where Kashimo existed, and his output was well known about, considering he was the beast of the Edo period, well known and well feared in accordance with a big Ajaku, and Ryu's boasted to have the highest output of all the Culling Game players, and he was able to eat hits from that repeatedly, including Granite Blast with some charred hands and immediately getting knocked around, then hypothetically, Yuta could face take the lightning bolts too. It really, this battle comes down to, does Kashimo use Curse technique, and then how quickly does Yuta use Domain? Because I don't think Yuta's going to have the time to set up Jacob's Ladder organically. I think Kashimo will legit chase him the entire time and try to keep blasting his face off if Kashimo's in CT. So CT Kashimo should be more than fast enough, more than strong enough to avoid Rika, maybe irradiate her and force her to worry about regeneration, and put the beats on Yuta. I think, logistically, just based on his scaling, the speed of his attacks, and Yuta's lack of scaling to the speed of those attacks. But if Yuta opens Domain, Kashimo loses. Whether it be a sure hit of Sky Manipulation, whether it be a sure hit of especially Angel's Technique, which will force Kashimo back to base, whether it be Yuta with all the swords around him, no matter what, Heaven forbid if the domain is based on cleaving dismantle. All that, Kashimo loses. He gets domain diffed, which is because Yuta's domain is extremely broken. But AP, well, that's the thing. You could make the argument that AP-wise, Yuta should be bulky enough, but at the same time, you could not make that argument. Because its durability is lower than Ryu's. And, like, Ryu's able to... It's weird. It's weird if you think the Lightning Bolt is a form of Duraneg, considering what it does to Hikari, despite Hikari's abilities to eat Kashimo's hits, or you just think, like, the Lightning Bolt surpasses Ryu's output, then the damage should be lethal, and you can make an argument for Kashimo. But if you think anything other than that, if you think Yuta's either bulky enough to eat hits, if you think Yuta gets domain off, if you think Rika is able to hold off Kashimo long enough that Yuta could open domain, or Yuta could set up any of his techniques, then obviously Kashimo's going to lose. At least in my opinion. It's a chaotic fight. It's why I'm hesitating to make the video myself, because it's kind of like, I mean, how do you tackle it? Because does Yuta immediately go for domain? Does he immediately try to domain GG Kashimo? Because he would. Because Kashimo, even with Hollow Worker Basket, even if you argue that it can be maintained in spite of not having to hold your hands together based on what Reggie does against Megami, we see Hollow Worker Basket still up around him. I still think a Kashimo who's limited to Hollow Worker Basket is having his techniques shut down and is fighting Yuta and Rika is still a bit too much for him. Especially a domain amped Yuta. I don't know. Let's see what Restless Gambler has to say. I'm going on. And I'm trying to like keep some thoughts away for my own Kashimo versus Yuta video. Because this really is the discussion. This is the debate on who's number 3. It's... Kenjaku has kind of been taken out of the running because of how poor his performance was against Yuta. But once again, that's context and stuff like that. You can definitely make the arguments. But like the 3 runnings for the top 3 in the verse are literally Kenny, Yuta, and Kashimo. So I'm interested to see how Restless Gambler tackles this. Let's take a look. But considering he says it's completely one-sided, I'm smelling domain diff GG. I'm going to hazard a guess. If Restless Gambler's going to say something, it's going to be domain diff GG. But we'll see.
In Kashimo, one being a prodigy born as a descendant of the great Michizane, the other a fighter so fierce his overwhelming strength led him to actual old age. But what would happen if these two were to come to blows? Well, in today's video, let's find out exactly that. What's up guys, Restless Gambly here, and in today's video, we've got a crazy topic. These two characters were the only ones other than Gojo to damage Sukuna conventionally, and so it's to no one's surprise that they are at the forefront of people's minds. The god of lightning Hajime Kashimo versus the cursed child Yuta Okkotsu.
I think that he's actually right now that I think about it. Because Yuji hasn't done like damage. Like he's done soul damage, but like in terms of physical hits, he hasn't really done much to Sukuna. At least that's noticeable. Kusakabe technically cheats by using domain hacks, which amps him and nerfs Sukuna. Miguel also nerfs Sukuna and barely does any damage, or at least noticeable damage. Maki uses SSK, which is specifically durability negation. Higuruma gives him a haircut, if you want to count that, using Executioner's Blade. But Sukuna does damage to himself, Higuruma doesn't do damage to him. And, I mean Gojo, but like Gojo cheats. Once again, by using like the blue rat fists and stuff like that. So yeah, I think he's right. Like who has normally damaged Sukuna? Even LaRue technically uses their technique, but I don't even think that counts as damage. Once again, that's more hacks. And even then, I'm not sure if it did damage. I never thought about it that way. Huh. Yeah, that's weird. We've had like 10 people fight Sukuna, yet none of them have done normal damage to him. Except for Yuta. And I guess you could argue Yuta kind of cheats, but at the same time, not really. Like, he's domain amped, which I guess is fair, and Sukuna's forcing a lot of his cursed energy into the Hollow Wicker Basket to make sure it doesn't get shut down. And he even mentions that his own output is, like, screwy, and obviously he's massively weakened at the time. But, like, logistically speaking, Yuta does tear out his tongue and rip off his arms and tear out his face with his regular sword and physicals. He doesn't use anything special. He does do damage with Thin Icebreaker, but he does a lot of damage just like physical grabbing and yanking and slashing and stuff like that. And Kashimo, like you mentioned, does have that on Sukuna, and he does draw some juice from him. The one other person I'm trying to think technically draws juice is technically Maki through some of her like CQC physical combat tossing around. You do see some blood fly off of him, but that could be blood from like his open wounds, which exist at that point, which include like the hard stab, his missing arms. Like, that could easily be that, and not, like, actual Sukuna taking damage. Just, you know, his actual juice is Can I say that? Yeah, his actual like juice is leaking everywhere. So that's a good point. I never considered it that way. These are the two who damage Sukuna. Of course, Yuta's damage is much more extreme, but also technically for Yuta, it's under much better circumstances. Because like Kashimo fought a freshly incarnated Sukuna, no soul debuffs. Meanwhile, Yuta fought a Sukuna with some soul debuffs, and one that was interested in him from knowing about the curse. So interesting. Let's take a look, Restless.
Before we get into the video, YouTube tells me only 18% of the people who watch my content are subscribed.
Oh, golly! Hold on, let me like the video real quick. But let me. I'm about to take a little peek at my analytics real quick. That's the beauty of having the Googler on deck like this. Let me take a peek at my analytics. How many of y'all are actually subscribed right now? Let me take a look in a book. No reading rainbow. Hold on, analytics. Yeah. Overview. Yeah. Golly, these shorts have been going crazy. But let me see. Where are you? How do I even do that? Is it research? No, not research. Overview, views. Sorry, I'm bringing you all on like this little expedition because notably, I never really bring up that statistic because I almost never look at it. But let me take a peek. No, it's just all of you. I don't need that. Audience. There we go. It should be our audience. Subscribe versus not subscribe. Wow. You know what? I'm actually doing pretty good. Well, at least relatively speaking, like a lot of people do say that. Like they get a lot of views for people who aren't subscribed. My watch time from subscribers, 54% of people who watch my videos are subscribed, while 45% are not subscribed. So the 45% gotta subscribe. I mean, yeah, come on, huh? But yeah, go subscribe to Restless Gambler. I mean, quality content, like of all kinds. I don't even read One Piece nor watch One Piece. I watch Restless Gambler's One Piece videos because they're always hilarious, and he covers more than it's. JJK and One Piece are the two that mainly come to mind, but I think he covers other series too. I need to double check. I know he covers other series. I've watched videos of him talking about other series, but those are the main two that come to mind. You like JJK or One Piece, you like good edited content. Go people, what you doing? Let's see.
If you enjoy GTK videos like these, go ahead and subscribe. You get more videos, and we'll both be happy.
I need to leave a comment on this video too.
To start this video off,
gotta fight the algorithm one step at a time. Gotta do anything within our power to fight the algorithm with our greatest strength.
we definitely have to go into the cursed child, Yuta Kotsu. Yuta is someone of immense strength, stated to be second to only Gojo. The implications of this statement are debated amongst the community, but in the end, all it does is upscale Yuta to the peaks of the verse. So let's start off with Yuta's strength. Yuta obviously goes through an immense training session during the time skip that we never got to see, but before it, Yuta was a force to be reckoned with. In his fight with Yuji during his mission to kill him, he manages to throw an entire car back at Yuji. This feat was something that shook Yuji to his core, and Yuta says that he's actually on the weaker side. Yuji makes an observation on the amount of cursed energy Yuta has and says that Yuta is the exact opposite of him. While Yuji already has insane physical stats without cursed energy, Yuta compensates for his lack of power with cursed energy. But Yuta's cursed energy pool is so large that it makes him stronger than most others. Yuta then goes on to confirm that he has more cursed energy than Gojo. The difference is, however, that he can run out of cursed energy while Gojo can't. After this piece of dialogue, Yuta goes on to box with Yuji and he manages to kick him. This kick throws Yuji off as it was insanely hard, and then he slashes Yuji. Yuji breaks Yuta's sword, however, but then
I will admit though, it is weird. Because here's the thing, right? Yuta and Yuji give a lot of credit to Yuta's insane level of strength based on his raw cursed energy amounts. They're like, oh, you have crazy amounts of cursed energy, that's why you're so strong. But it also comes to the fact that Yuta has really high output. Like, notably, we know cursed energy amounts aren't everything. It's not like Dragon Ball, where like because even Dragon Ball has weird exceptions, like the androids who technically have infinite stamina or infinite ki, even though you can't sense it. But it's not like a series like Dragon Ball or Naruto or heck, even like Seven Deadly Sins or something like that, where like the more raw energy you have contained in yourself, the higher your stats get. There are stat caps. Like, characters do hit stat caps. Like, Mei Mei introduces this in Shibuya, the whole idea that she's refined her physical body to its peak, to its limit. You cannot go higher. Mei Mei cannot go higher. She can only kind of flatline maintain, and according to Sukuna, maybe get better defensively. But in terms of increasing her strength, there is a limit. It's why Jackpot Akari isn't the strongest character in the verse, despite having infinite amounts of curse energy. But with that being the case, this throws that into question, right? But I think it's just because output wasn't really a metric that either of these characters could properly explain at that point, and it gets more clarified later on with Ryu, because Ryu has way higher output than Yuta, to the point where Yuta post-time skip still isn't as bulky as Ryu. Because Ryu was just born with really high output. I think that determines the level of strength. So Yuta, despite not having output as high as Ryu, he just has insanely high output. Which is crazy to think. He probably, especially with the whole I'm the weaker type comparison, which does make sense, he was a sickly boy. Like, he must have, next to Ryu, Gojo, Sukuna, and maybe Kashimo, like, he has some of the highest output in the entire series. Relative. Because remember how much of a gap he's clearing. Yuji's extremely powerful, but he's clearing less of a gap with his curse energy reinforcement. Yuta, it's basically all his output and reinforcement, which is very, very impressive for the feats he goes to pull off.
Something else appears. Rika. This entity is going to make this video a whole lot more crazy. While Yuta is strong himself, Rika is another variable in his power. But before we go into her scaling, let's continue talking about Yuta. As we all know, Yuta was massively holding back against Yuji here, but when we do see him try is in the Sendai colony against the Cockroach, Uro, and Ryu. Against the Cockroach, he utterly dominates him in physicality. With one attack, he sends him flying and slices off limbs easily. He ultimately exercises him with reverse curse technique, but we'll go into that later. In the 3v1 against Ryu and Uro, Yuta boxes with Ryu for a little bit, showing relativity and speed, but it's mainly Ryu who's doing the damage as both of them are talking about his attacks. He then summons Rika fully and jumps Uro while Uro can't defend herself, but she still goes on to box Yuta in the 1v1 right after. Mind you, Yuta had his gauntlets on, which could be argued to increase his attack power. This can be a testament to Uro's durability, but take that as you will. Yuta goes on to use...
Here's the weird thing about Sendai and Yuta's general base strength. And it's why y'all found me in the reviews, like, tweaking out a little bit when Yuta was doing, like, the insane levels of damage, like, ripping out Sukuna's organs, tearing off his limbs. Because Yuta... Especially when Sukuna's like, oh yeah, BT dubs, your defensive got stronger. Your output in terms of like offenses didn't increase because y'all had already peaked that. It confused me because like Yuta just wasn't hitting. Like it gets weird retrospectively. You kind of have to go with the prior statement that everyone's stats just got a universal flatline, which some people do, and you kind of have to ignore the secondary statement about defenses, or just say defenses may have gotten amped extra. Like their general stats kind of went up, but the defense went extra high up. You kind of have to go with that, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense for you to be able to just tear through Sukuna's limbs. I get it. He's domain amped, Sukuna's domain debuffed, and focusing a lot of his cursed energy everywhere. But, like, for Uro to eat a wombo combo double breakfast sandwich from Yuta and Rika at the same time, and then take no, like, lethal damage, and then Yuta out here just casually tearing out pieces of true form Sukuna. Either Uro's durability is insane, or Sukuna's lowering his durability, or his durability was forcefully lowered by all the external circumstances. I'm leaning more towards the latter, because if not, things get weird, strength-wise. And remember, it's going to sound crazy, and no people aren't going to like this when I say it, but every single physical feat that Yuta and Rika do just upscales Ryu. He could do literally everything that Yuta and Rika have done. Give him a sword, he could do the exact same thing that Yuta did in terms of slicing arms off. Ryu likely would have ripped out some of Sukuna's intestines if he actually got his hands on him. It's crazy to think about, but that's how it goes. Because Yuta's just weaker than Ryu. Even when going all out. Which is crazy. Crazy. Even after the 1 time skip, Ryu's still the bulkiest character after Yuta. Or no, above even Yuta. Which is weird to think about. But like on a scaling perspective, it does make things weird. Because like, whoa. Why are you this strong? But I can see why Restless Game was like, hey, you could give it credit to Uro. But then he doesn't go too deep into that, because if you give credit to Uro, then you need to retroactively look, later into the future towards Sukuna and be like, what's going on here? What is the durability looking like? What are these scales here? But of course,
domain expansion, which we'll go into in a second, but after that domain fails, he enters a clash with Ryu. Ryu goes on to cancel out Yuta's beam, which may or may not be a weakened version of his full power. During this fight, however, Yuta acquired the ability to use sky manipulation and hits Ryu with Thin Icebreaker, doing damage to him. Ryu is someone known to have one for Yuta acquire.
A notable point though about the beam clash, and I bring this up all the time, especially back in the. I don't think I'll have to double check. I may do like a litmus test or a litmus. Is it litmus or litmus? Whatever. I may do a litmus test on like how the community feels about Yuta going all out in Sendai again. I was always in the camp that he did. A bunch of people said he was just holding back like crazy, but I was always in the camp. And based on the recent Sukuna statements, I think that just doubles down that Ryu had forced Yuta to go all out at that point. But I'll see. Yuta's beam didn't cancel out Ryu's. It was broken through. Like, we literally see a weakened Ryu who's super duper fatigued post the domain expansion just casually force through Yuta's beam. He do that. Like crazy. He just built like that for real. Ryu's him. Don't sleep on Ryu. Ryu, you can make real solid arguments. We don't know his domain though. That's the only thing. We don't know his domain. It's over refinement and stuff like that. But you can make real solid arguments that Ryu's a top 10 character. Easily. With his output, his speed scaling, and depending on how you interpret a lot of the post time skip stuff, Ryu's still him. Don't sleep. I've seen people putting Ryu beneath Jogo? Beneath Mahito? My boy Ryu? Wake up. Stop dreaming.
The ability to use sky manipulation and hits Ryu with Thin Icebreaker, doing damage to him. Ryu is someone known to have one of the best durabilities, as Sukuna states, so this feat is something to know. But all we've been discussing is stuff from pre-time skip. Now, let's get into the insane things Yuta accomplishes.
This is a Yuta versus Kashimo video, but it's gonna slowly but surely turn into a Ryu Glaze video. I say it all the time. There are three in the entire series that damage Ryu. His own attacks, actual spatial manipulation Duraneg. Actually, it's 4, because Sukuna. But like, and Rika, Orimoto, fully manifested, Queen of Curses, does damage to him. And then Sukuna cleaves him in 3. But like, once again, cleave is an auto-adjust thing. So it's also a form of Duraneg. Ryu's him. Don't say you go back once again. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I was wrong. But I'm gonna say it again, even if I was wrong. I don't think Yuta does damage to Ryu at all with any normal attack. I think at best he like knocks away some of Ryu's, but he loses every single clash physically because he's simply not that guy relative to Ryu in terms of his crazy output. Because Ryu was him. Sorry, I'm a Ryu writer. I don't know why. I just like the character a whole lot. But let's see. And if you ever wonder, Pencil, are you an Agenda Kaisen fan? Are you an Agenda hole? Yes. I'm not gonna lie and try to not. I am. But y'all know. It's Agenda Kaisen out here in these streets. But let's see. We're hopping in the post-time skip. It's going crazy.
Right off the bat, we see that Yuta can clash and box with a Sukuna who's trying to size him up, but then Yuta lets off his domain expansion. This is where everything went uphill for Yuta, because with it, he can use all of his curse techniques. The first thing he uses is Thin Icebreaker. Thin Icebreaker by nature is a Duraneg attack, and it broke through Sukuna's guard, dealing the first blow of damage to his high-never body. Yuta then goes on to use Cleave, Sukuna's own curse technique, against him. The potency
Oh, he's about to talk about it. I'll let him talk
Yuta's
about it.
attack gets put into question, considering the fact that despite Cleave being a durability negating technique, Sukuna easily tanks it. Still, this is an incredibly vital technique to have in his arsenal. In the chapter after,
that's the weird thing. It's weird to think about, but hear me out. And it literally lives this way. Yuta's 2 Duraneg attacks in Sky Manipulation Thin Icebreaker and Sukuna's own Cleave do less damage than his regular hits and his sword. Let me repeat. I do declare. His Duranegation spatial manipulation attacks and his Duranegation slicing attack do less damage to Sukuna than his actual physical hits. I don't know. It's weird. It is so strange. The only way I've been able to like rationalize it in my head after looking at it again, Yuji does land a few more hits after the sky manipulation, and then lands hits again after the cleave. So maybe Sukuna's defensive capabilities and reinforcement just keep dropping further and further. So that's why we get moments like this where you're just drawing blood from uppercuts and tearing limbs off and tearing tongues out. Because his output just keeps falling further and further. So Sukuna may be able to just completely no-sell, even Duraneg attacks, from characters with Yuta's output. It's just that his nerfs get so heavy that the physical attacks of Yuta do more. That's the only way I've been able to rationalize it, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense for Yuta's Duraneg attacks to do way less damage. The only other explanation I've seen that I'm also okay with is the idea that Yuta suppressed his cleave, which sounds crazy. But he suppressed his cleave and he suppressed this thin icebreaker. Why? Because he's still trying to save Megami. If he had really just Duraneg thin icebreaker Sukuna straight to the dome, then he may have had blown his head off. But even that, nah, because Ryu eats it. But I guess you could make the argument that he was trying to spare Ryu, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. But I do think it's still crazy that does more damage. His regular attacks do versus his actual special attacks. That's like a regular, for my fighting game players out there, that's like you hit the punch button in Guilty Gear and it does more damage than one of your specials. Right? Like it doesn't necessarily make sense. Like instead of doing quarter circle back X or quarter circle back kick or punch, you do a quarter circle back, or no, you just do kick or punch and it does more damage. It doesn't really make sense, but there are ways to write around it or rationalize it. So I do that for my sanity.
Lets off his cleave, we see him fully go crazy, slicing Sukuna's arms, ripping out his second tongue, and then using one of his most lethal weapons yet, Jacob's Ladder. I'll explain what exactly allowed Yuta to do this later on, but just know this is a deadly weapon to have in your arsenal.
It is what makes the battle decisive, in my opinion, for Yuta v Kashimo. If Domain activates, and if Jacob's Ladder happens, Kashimo loses. Because all it takes is one hit, and then he perishes immediately. Remember, the moment, at least according to him, it's questionable, because he knows how the technique works. So how would he know that he would die immediately afterwards, unless it's implied that flashback we see with Kashimo is the first time he ever used his curse technique, and he died right after that. But at least by how it's described, the moment Kashimo's technique turns off, he dies, because his flesh falls apart. He can't maintain that. He doesn't have RCT or anything like that to restore his body after the uses of his technique. So if Jacob's Ladder happens after Kashimo activates his technique, he literally insta-dies. Not even to Jacob's Ladder, just to like actually turning back into a regular human being. Unless, and this gets weird, unless you want to argue that hypothetically Jacob's Ladder is not instantaneous. Like it'll turn off a technique progressively. So maybe Kashimo can escape it and resist the reversion and then keep fighting. But in Yuta's domain, and without Yuta having an incentive to turn it off like he did in the battle with Sukuna, I don't think that's really the case. I don't really see any reason why Yuta would turn it off. And I don't see how Kashimo would really escape that. Especially if Rika just forces his arms open and Yuta starts... Like, I think it would get crazy.
This Jacob's Ladder fries Sukuna, or at least we thought, as Sukuna goes on to almost kill Yuta right after. Yuta also has a very contentious feat against Kenjaku, as he's able to one-shot him. There's insane discourse throughout the community, some interpreting this scene as Kenjaku on guard, some thinking he's off guard, but nevertheless, this gives credence to Yuta's lethality with a sword. With that said, we aren't even done with the strength section yet, because
we gotta talk about Rika. But, well, maybe something else with Yuta specifically too. But, yeah, I don't know. The Kenny feat, it's still so, like, forget about, this sounds so stupid, especially as a guy who does prefer narrative. I know I'm a power scalar guy, but like, I do actually like narrative. And I like characters even more than narrative. That's why I kind of still don't like it. But putting all the narrative and character reasons aside, why you may not like Yuta just one-shotting Kashimo after the Tagama fight, that feat has been nightmarish. It's done so many weird things. It's thrown some characters out of top 10 Like, it's thrown Yuki out of top 10, at least in my opinion. Once again, just because of speed and stuff like that. If you interpret it straight, if you get into the complications of it, then it gets weird. Because then, the thing is, right, it's a 50-50 feat. It's a one or the other feat. It's a binary. Where you take the feat as valid, meaning Kenny's a base Yuta victim and would get perception blitz regardless. Meaning that characters like Suguru Geto, characters like Yuki Tsukumo, characters like Choso, all of them are all whole perception blitz tiers below Yuta. And you kind of just have to hold that and then let the chips fall where they may on a scaling from there. And then anyone who does scale to base Yuta in speed, one way or another, is whole perception blitz tiers above those characters, and that's why they fall out of the top 10 and stuff like that. Or, you see the feat doesn't matter. And then, things get weird again. It's like, okay, now what does that mean? Does Yuta not scale to Kenjaku at all? Because you can go by the narrative implications and be like, well, he doesn't really scale. He did the whole plan with Takaba. Kenjaku's brain was explicitly noted to be fried and in a weird state. Takaba explicitly messed with Kenny's head the entire time, so he wasn't on guard at all. And sure, we do see Kenny turn around, acknowledge Yuta and all that, but maybe that's still part of Takaba's illusions. We just don't know. So on a scaling front, that feat is nightmarish. I will not lie to you. And it leads into a thing that's kind of been haunting the back half, or not necessarily the back half. I'd say really like the last 40 chapters of JJK. Does any scaling matter? Because Sugen is massively nerfed and extremely playful. So can we actually use Sukuna performances to compare characters? We kind of have to, because we don't have anything else for certain characters. Kashimo's scaling is entirely reliant on the Sukuna fight. Yuta's recent scaling is entirely reliant on the Sukuna fight. Yudi's recent scaling is entirely reliant on the Sukuna fight. Higuruma's scaling. Kusakabe's scaling. Miguel's scaling. Luru's scaling. Well, Miguel kind of has like statements about him being relative to Gojo in terms of raw physicals, so that's kind of separate. But like, that's the thing. There are so many other variables that are kind of reliant on the Sukuna fight, and by proxy the Kenjaku scuffle, because I can't really call it a fight, that once you pick that binary, it bisects the series. There's no like mingling the two. There's no midpoint. The narrative implies that the battle had to go that way, or Yuta would have struggled and possibly lost. So Yuta's not, or Kenny's not a base Yuta victim. But the feat happens in a way where it can be interpreted that Kenny's a base Yuta victim. It's the narrative and what happens on panel fighting each other, which is annoying, but it'd be like that when it'd be like that, especially when it'd be like that. So I can understand why this is headache material, because it's headache material.
We haven't even gotten into the second entity Yuta has, Rika. Rika appears in the current story as Yuta and Yuji fight, locking Yuji in place while merely being partially manifested. Emphasis on the partially manifested state is important because Rika reaches her full power when Yuta creates a connection between the two with his ring. The Rika we see in chapter 178 is her in all her glory, with an inventory full of cursed tools. We've never actually seen Rika herself use any of the cursed tools, so we won't attribute it to her own abilities, but the cursed tools she does have are a great benefit to Yuta himself. She's also able to block Ryu's blast with her.
Ironically enough, that does come with like the whole issue that you'd have for a long time. Like, what does he actually have? What are those cursed tools? We do not know. And the ones that he did have, like the gauntlets, were destroyed. We have no idea what they do. But yeah, Rika's beastly. She's weirdly beastly. Like, notably, she also gets a pretty solid amp, somewhat, seemingly enough, during post-time skip. Because her in her manifested state being inferior to Ryu Ishiguri, yet her in her unmanifested state, while possibly not even domain amped, able to manhandle Sukuna a bit, like throw him around, grab his attacks, do crazy stuff to him, force him to struggle. That's big stuff. But once again, all this is just Ryu upscaling. So I'm not mad.
Ryu himself stating that the feat was just as strong as Yuta's. Like I mentioned earlier, however, Ryu cancelled out the combined efforts of both Yuta and Rika's love beam, but then we find out that Rika herself can shoot a beam. This beam was shrugged off by Ryu, but as we established before, Ryu is a durability monster. Rika even punches Ryu in the head and gets immediately one shot right after. After the time skip, Rika is able.
That's the thing. It's the weird. Here's the thing, right? How does Rika get stronger? Right? Because we know Rika's not Yuta's technique. I know the data book says that, but like, what the story says, she cannot be Yuta's technique. Because techniques disappear and fatigue after domain expansions. We've seen Yuta's domain expansion fall apart twice. One of his own free will, one of his not. Rika's never affected. She's just a cursed spirit tied to him. That's why Sukuna calls him the cursed brat. Because she's linked to him, hunched over him. Not in that way, that's weird. But that's the thing. So can Rika get stronger? If not, then we're just upscaling Ryu even more. Essentially, once again, kind of like how every single feat Yuta does is just a Ryu upscale, every single feat Rika does is a Yuta upscale. Or is a Ryu upscale. Because Rika does crazy things to Sukuna that Ryu should be able to do, since it's confirmed canonically by the narrator and feats on panel that Ryu just hits harder than Rika does, even fully manifested. And unless you want to tell me that base Rika drastically surpassed her fully manifested self somehow over the course of the month, even though we don't know how she could train and get stronger, because she's a cursed spirit. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, we're about to go into the Sukuna fight feats where she does just start... It takes basically no damage, and then the moment she gets hit by a bunch of dismantles, she just casually heals it off and drags Yuta away. So she's her. She's definitely dangerous, and she's a big issue in this fight. But she's a big issue in every fight. Rika's very annoying, except for like the few people who can kind of ignore her, either through speed gaps or Durnek. But
to push Sukuna around on multiple occasions, and is even able to hold Sukuna in place while Yuta and Yuji pummel him. This leads us into speed. Pre-time skip, Yuta is able to go toe-in-toe with Ryu in hand-to-hand combat, but there's a feat before the Culling Games that you probably forgot even existed. When Naoya meets Yuji and Choso, he ends up blitzing them initially, but they eventually start trying to retaliate. Naoya, seeing this, says that they're tough, saying that he might up his speed. When Yuta arrives, shaking everyone by his presence, Naoya starts twerking for him, saying he'll go for Choso. Then all of a sudden, a fight breaks out, and Yuta is able to outpace Naoya's speed by getting to the same place at the same time as Naoya from a farther position. Of course, you can take it with a grain of salt, but literally in the next page, it's implied Yuta's speed isn't even at its max because he has a katana drawn. After the time skip, Yuta is able to go blow for blow with a Sukuna who's at the same cursed energy pool as him. Rika is a different...
That's... Once again, Yuta's speed is kind of nightmarish. Everything about Yuta is nightmarish. I'll say it. But that's a good thing. I do like Yuta. Scaling Yuta is one of the most fun things to do in JJK, because they're like... I'd say there are like 3 different metas you scale him to. Either he's just third strongest, because second is Satoru Gojo. Modern day, no one's implied to scale Satoru Gojo, no one else gets a similar accolade, Yuta's him. Then there's the middle point where like Yuta's powerful, but not like confirmed third powerful. Like he's in competition with Kenny due to the suspicions and the narrative behind Kenny versus Yuta and Kenny versus Takaba and stuff like that. And Kashimo's still up there because he's the strongest of his own era, and he deals with the strongest, freshest Sukuna, and he's responsible for ending Meguna, and like you get contenders with that. Or you go to the third level, where Yuta's gonna like, I mean, he's definitely up there, he's definitely powerful, but he does get matchup checked by a lot of different characters who would be able to deal with him and Rika pretty simply, or have ways to work around him and his abilities, like your Ryus, or like your Makis, your Tojis, and stuff like that. You can get contentious with it, you can get fancy with it, you can get a little bit devious with it. That's the thing with Yuta. But with his speed, it's really, like, I used that Naobito feat in the past. In fact, there are some old scripts that I wrote where I used that Naobito or Naoya feat as, like, direct, like, oh yeah, Yuta's faster than Naoya and Naobito because he's able to do that while suppressed and stuff like that, and in base, no full power. But the issue with that is, like, one, we don't know if Naoya was using projection sorcery there. We don't know if he upped his speed from when he was blitzing Choso and Yuji. We don't know if Yuta is free of that statement made about Naobito, about him being the second fastest sorcerer. We see someone being relative to Yuta who's most likely, I know people can argue against it, but most likely going all out against Ryu. We see a 15-finger Meguna Perception Blitz Ryu, who Yuta's relative to, and if you go with the interpretation that only defense has increased post-time skip, then it gets even more tragic. Because then Yuta's speed is the same pre-time skip, meaning he's still a 15-finger Meguna Blitz victim. So, like, characters who are able to even remotely keep up with that Meguna should be better. Unless you argue things get weird there, too. So, I don't know. Yuta's speed is funny. I'm only going to say this. He's not faster than Light. I don't think there's really much of anything to suggest that.
Pace, we really don't get to see any crazy speed scaling for her. She just happens to be in the right place at the right time.
The only real speed scaling you get for Rika is that she's, when in a jumping scenario, able to tag Sukuna from time to time, like grab him and do stuff. And also, she does have that whole exchange. It's very tiny. It's a very small part of that chapter. But she does have a tiny exchange where she is able to like Mink Mink with Ryu Ishigori. That's about it. He's right. Like, Rika's speed scaling is weird. It's mainly all Yuta, because Rika is an accent piece to Yuta. So it makes sense that it goes that way.
But off screen because she's basically a tool for Yuta. However, you could argue relativity to Yuta because once they both jump Uro, she's able to keep up with him in combat and not hinder him or leave him behind. A better stat to go into is durability and endurance. This is where things start to shine because post time skip, the thing that's been heavily emphasized is the fact that everyone's durability has increased tremendously. When Yuta arrives on the battlefield, he takes a couple of slashes to the face and completely brushes them off, healing them with ease. Then later on, with Yuji, Yuta charges at Sukuna, but Sukuna retaliates with some slashes, to which both of them survive and are able to start healing from. Sukuna then says that if he doesn't get direct contact with them, he wouldn't be able to give them a fatal wound, just like it was with Ryu. For context, Sukuna at 15 fingers tried to one-shot Ryu, but was surprised to see that he tanked the first slash. So he goes in for a direct touch and slices Ryu's head into 3. Sukuna says it's the same situation as it was with him right now, but he also...
This is the big point. Everyone's stronger. Everyone's more defensive, but they aren't more defensive than Ryu. You know what that means? It means that anything Ryu would fall to, they would fall to as well. So, that dismantle that did a big chunk of damage on Ryu, that was from a casual, suppressed Meguna, still did a decent chunk. It still split him. That means every single dismantle that Yuta and Yuji get hit with is lesser than that dismantle, in terms of output at least, despite whatever Sukuna's trying to do, because his output's that low. It's once again why it's kind of hard to do much off of the Sukuna fight in terms of scaling for these characters, because it's just very vague. It's very weird. It's very funny, and not in the actual fun way, like in the gosh darn it, I love that Ryu's so bulky, but now everything else seems weird kind of way. Because characters are just eating dismantles left and right. Because once again, it's hard to tell how hard Sukuna's going, and how much these dismantles are being nerfed and or buffed at the time, based on how many hits he's taken from Yuji, based on Sukuna's own mentality, based on the domain amps or domain debuff, like... It's nightmarish.
That they
it's fun,
don't have better durability than him. Sukuna goes on to say that it's not even the fact that his curse energy output is weakened, it's just that everyone's durability has increased drastically.
It's not just the fact. It does. I still think his diminished curse energy output and his own mentality play a massive role into it. But yeah, everyone else has gotten beefier. But even Yuta Okotsu, who for... Like, I always was... chanting from the heavens that Ryu was bulkier than Yuta, but people, they called me crazy, they called me a madman, they said I had lost my mind, but I clearly was right. For once, I'm very consistently wrong in JJK, so don't, let me have this one, alright? Yuta fans, let's shake hands on this, give me one, gosh darn it. But with that one, gosh darn it, there does come the issue of like, okay, so we're giving that one, that's nice, that's juicy, that's clean, that's a little bit buttery, I see what you're doing. But, like, now, where does everyone scale relative to Ryu beneath them? And how much output, like, how much do you scale downwards from Ryu? And Sukuna slashes, and how much that they eat, and how much output.
Of course, Sukuna continues to drop in curse energy output as Yuji continues to pile attacks on him. And it gets to the point where Yuta is able to brush off slashes to the face with direct contact. Yuta's tanking run comes to an end, however, when Sukuna manages to send off a world-cutting slash at Yuta.
Now, here's the thing about this. My thoughts have changed. I don't think this is a world-cutting slash anymore. I don't. I think it's just a full chant dismantle. Which I know it seems crazy, but here's the thing. With it being confirmed that he needs to hit the Enma 10 hand sign, when does he do that? In this particular, when can he? Like, unless he did it in the void space right here with his upper two arms, which were being held by Rika, and remember his lower arm was torn off, he can't have hit Enma 10. Which is a requirement for World Slash. That is what's confirmed. That is a built-in requirement. Unless it's confirmed later that he made another binding vow here, this isn't World Slash. This is just a full power dismantle. Which is crazy, don't get me wrong, but it also actually makes more narrative sense in context for earlier stuff that I'll once again go into my own video about. But if this is the case, if this is a full power dismantle, it gets devious. But I don't know. It's debatable. Do y'all think this is World Slash? If you think it is, let me know why. Or explain to me, like, I mean, I guess he could have just done the hand sign off screen, but the introduction that he needs to do the hand sign is not just the chance. That's a big thing. It sends a lot of things that we thought were World Slash into question, especially since he's also pointing like this. He's not pointing with his palm, unless this is meant to be his palm. But like part of his palm is covered. Like I'm not sure if this is meant to be. So it does get weird. It does get buku bonkers. And you may be saying, wait, Pencilman, if you don't think that's World Slash, do you think he tried to hit Monkey with World Slash? No, not anymore. Not with that confirmation. I think he just tried to hit her with a full chant dismantle. Which is, but of course, if y'all still think this is World Slash, I'm not mad at it. But I'm now in the camp that I don't think it is, because we just don't see the hand sign. I don't think Gege would introduce that requirement and like have Sukuna use multiple World Slashes without that hand sign unless he was being very specific. It's highly likely Sukuna hasn't used World Slash. I mean, maybe we see the hand sign against, maybe we see the Enma-ten hand sign against Kashimo. I think it's only Gojo and Kashimo, but maybe it's just Gojo, which I know seems crazy. And that's the other thing. In the chapter itself, Sukuna says he's going for a World Cutting Slash in his head. But I'm not
straight
sure.
through him.
It's weird.
Yuta doesn't completely die automatically, however, because he breaks his domain consciously and makes a signal. Rika, on the other hand, actually suffers more than Yuta. I can't really gauge if there's a great disparity between him and Rika, but right before Sukuna's statement about Yuta's durability, he touches Rika's hand and completely dissects it. Rika is able to completely brush this off, however, because of something we like to call hacks. Rika is a Shikigami of some sort, so she's able to completely heal herself without problem. But beyond that, she and Yuta have tons of incredible techniques. Something you probably didn't even know is that Yuta and Rika share vision. I don't know how the hell that works, but they do. This can be used as an upskill.
Language. That is weird. That is... Wait. Editing me. Wake up. Let's see. Da-da-da. No, that's wrong. Oh shoot. Time, it's fading. I did not know that they share vision. I guess it is implied, but that's a big thing. That's a big thing. That's nice. That's nice. I mean, it's more effective in jumping scenarios than it is on 1v2s, because like sharing vision.
One of Yuta's stolen curse techniques, G Battle Staff. With this technique, Yuta is able to look into the future of his opponent. The problem with the technique, however, was that the person had to be in their line of sight. With this ridiculous power Yuta has, he can quite literally see his blind spot, so he can never be taken off guard like Hikari did against Charles. This can be a good way to get an easy dodge and hit, as he does against Sukuna here. Yuta also has sky manipulation, and it allows him to fly, warp punches, and use a durability negating technique called Thin Icebreaker. Another technique Yuta has is Jacob's Ladder, that is described to be the complete eradication of a target's curse technique. Yuta has curse speech that allows him to tell weaker curses to die, and also allows him to keep Sukuna in place to hit him with another attack. He also has Drew's technique that never really actually damages anyone. And finally, Sukuna has Sukuna's curse technique.
Sukuna has Sukuna's curse technique? No, but to be fair, it does damage Sukuna, and it does damage Uro. It's weird, because the damage doesn't last, but they do hit, and I assume that's supposed to be their blood. I don't think that's a Shikigami. I think, like, whenever they come in contact with a Shikigami which orbit as a domain, they do get slashed. So, it's not too crazy, but still, the fact that it's able to do damage to Sukuna and Uro, good stuff. Well, let's see.
Cleave and dismantle. But wait, I'm not even done yet, and that's the crazy part. If Yuta has no connection with Rika, Yuta isn't able to use these curse techniques, but once he has a connection with Rika, he has 5 minutes to utilize 3 perks. 1. The use of his curse techniques. 2. The use of a fully manifested Rika. And 3. Rika's curse energy at his disposal. The last one is super important, because that means during these 5 minutes, Yuta has access to what it seems to be infinite curse energy. Yuta also has reverse curse techniques so potent that he can heal limbs. Yuta has tons of curse tools at his disposal to use from Rika's arsenal, and I haven't even gotten to his most broken ability, his domain expansion. On top of Yuta's proficiency in barrier techniques, Yuta can do something that only his curse technique would allow him to do. Yuta is a man with multiple curse techniques, so with that, he can take one of those curse techniques and make it the sure hit of the domain. Then the katanas all around him inhabit a new curse technique by itself. In the Sukuna fight, he opted to have Jacob's ladder as the sure hit, and he was actually able to make it maximum output. Then he had infinite swords at his disposal, all helping him to put the beast on Sukuna. Yuta also has beams he can shoot with Rika, which we went over earlier. But with all that said, Yuta is a heavily versatile character. So now let's get into the god of lightning, Hajime Kashimo.
Yo, we are 12 minutes and 34 seconds in this 20-minute video. Kashimo's gonna be like 4 seconds. But yeah, Yuta has a lot. That's why, in my opinion, in order to beat Yuta, you need to either be able to A, outstat him, and B, damage him. I know that sounds so stupid, like, isn't that always? But it's actually 3 things. You did A, outstat him in a very specific stat, B, have an answer for what he can do, and C, actually be able to damage him. Yuta's extremely bulky, he's extremely diverse, and he does have really, really good stats. But the reason why you'll hear me push it, why I believe a duo, and possibly individually for someone like Toji in his prime, so I'm like, I know, I'll make the video. But the reason you'll hear me say someone like Maki and Toji, or especially as a duo, would manhandle Rika and Yuta, is because they are hard counters to everything Yuta has. They have pretty solidly comparable at worst, most likely better speed stats, especially in reaction speed. They have Dura negation, and they are immune to his domain, meaning he has to land his techniques genuinely. And outside of Curse Speech, I don't see Yuta hitting either of them, just based on their existing feats. Kashimo could get crazy depending on how you scale the speed, and if you think Yuta can get domain off in the first place. Because remember, he still needs to make the hand sign. So if Kashimo gets to beating the brakes off of Yuta too quickly, and he's able to bat away Rika depending on how you scale Kashimo's strength, then there's still a chance that Kashimo could win. Do I think the chance is low? Absolutely. So let's see what Restless Gambler has to say.
Kashimo dominated the Culling games, boasting the most points out of anyone and holding second place even after using 100 of them to add a rule to the game. As soon as we see him in combat for the first time, multiple things are noted. He's fast, but at the same time his attacks are heavy. We can only scale Kashimo based on 3 fights, all of which give more to his scaling. So with that in mind, let's enter his strength. In his fight with Panda, each attack literally dismembers him. He can also stun you with each punch, but that's kind of a non-factor, as I'll go over in a second. When Hikari comes into the fight,
it's very unfortunate, but yeah, Yuta should also basically be immune to Kashimo's curse energy trait, at least the passive electrification part. Because even base Hikari doesn't necessarily note the stuns while he's in domain when he's fighting Kashimo, so like, you just need to be stronger than base Hikari. Or have more curse energy than him. Yuta is stronger and has more curse energy than base Hikari. So yeah, the electrification unfortunately just isn't necessarily a factor once you get strong enough.
It's very unquantifiable how much damage his actual punches are doing to him. This is because, of course, Hikari heals up from everything thrown at him. When Hikari's in base though, Hikari gets killed or at the very least knocked out multiple times within his own domain. The attack that really carries Kashimo's AP, however, is his lightning. The explanation for this is very dragged by Gege, so I'll explain it much simpler. Basically, the way regular lightning is formed is through the movement of negative. In layman's terms,
nah! Oh man, this guy, he's hilarious. The way I always say it, Kashimo hits you 4 times, you get hit with a lightning bolt. That's it. I mean, you can go into the why it's a sure hit through like the positive and negative charges, but yeah, he just hits you like 4 times, 5 times. It really depends. It seems random, but I feel like the average is like 4 times or so. I've seen it as low as 3. You get those hits, and then you're getting bolted. And the bolt will not miss because it's tied to you physically. Like the charges exist on you. The only way you'd be able to get rid of the bolt hitting you is tearing off where the bolt's coming at you, but the bolt also doesn't seem to follow a set logic to where it's going to go. At least not always. Sometimes Kashimo can direct it by pointing particularly at places he hasn't even hit, like he does in the Akari fight, and sometimes it just seems to come off of him naturally. Like when
he sends a lightning bolt at you after he makes you a target for it by hitting you a lot of times, and you can never dodge it. He uses his attack 4 times in the story. He one-shots Panda in his strongest form with it. He blows up Hikari's arm with it. He also blows up Hikari's torso by sending the charges to his staff. And finally, he tries to use it on Sukuna, but Sukuna transformed in the middle of it, taking no damage as a result. When Kashimo uses his curse technique, his stats skyrocket, with his main attacks being a blast he shoots from his mouth or other limbs.
One thing that I think is actually, I'm not sure if this is a thing, I typically give Kashimo credit for this, even though I'm not sure if it's confirmed. One of the things about Kashimo is you always place charges whenever you come in contact with them, and the charges do not have to be placed on animate objects. We see that with Kashimo's Nioi staff. So even hitting Kashimo is technically dangerous if you're making genuine physical contact with him, if you're not using projectiles, because every single punch you land or every time you hit him with your sword, the charges are being placed. That counter for how many he needs to hit you with always goes down whenever you're in physical contact with him, which is very, very big, because it means you're essentially auto-drawing an attack. So say, like, hypothetically, you hit Kashimo 5 times, you've run down the timer limit. Now a bolt's coming at you and you're not going to be able to dodge it.
Just like in base, the punches don't have quantifiable damage because he decks Sukuna in the face, but we don't see a result of it. He just automatically transforms into his true form. He also
a little bit of blood, tiny bit. It's not much. It's sad, but like, it's just you think all Sukunas are uniform just because it's Sukuna and its output shouldn't change all too much. And this is before Sukuna gets any like output debuffs, like from Yuji. Then technically this should still be very impressive that he's able to draw blood from Sukuna at all. Like even this super weak Sukuna should still have the same durability if you go with the idea that all Sukunas are uniform as true form Sukuna. So that's still very good that he's able to and get a little bit of blood off, because not many characters
hit Sukuna with a grand total of 1 blast, and it was blocked by Sukuna. On top of that, we don't see any visible damage to him either. But the stat I think Kashimo excels at is speed. Kashimo in this fight with Hikari is able to keep up with him in hand-to-hand combat while Hikari is suppressed. Of course, when Hikari decides to speed up, he starts blitzing Kashimo, but before, Kashimo is able to casually go blow for blow with him. He also dominates base Hikari, getting more hits in rather than getting hit. Apart from the fact that Kashimo's speed is specifically stated to be increased as well as beyond the limits of mankind, we see Kashimo punch Sukuna in the face immediately after reacting to the hit with the staff. After this, Kashimo gets embarrassed by true form Sukuna, but this performance is something that would happen to literally anyone in the verse other than Gojo. This is Sukuna we're talking about. In regards to durability and endurance, we really don't have much.
Because Hikari's a pillow puncher, bro. Here's the thing. With durability... Actually, no. I want to tackle the speed thing first. Yeah. Technically, him blitzing Sukuna, even if it's a super fatigued Meguna, is still crazy in context. Because of how fast Sukuna's implied to be. And with the precognition he's basically confirmed to have. It's still very impressive. It's still very impressive that he manages to... Bing, bing. Of course, Sukuna starts dodging him afterwards, which shows that Sukuna was likely suppressed, but still, that's very impressive on a speed front. And obviously, the main thing that you could do for Kashimo and his speed is the speed of his attacks. The electromagnetic wave should be light speed, which should be faster than almost anything else in the series. Even the lightning bolt is faster than most anything else in the series. And then you get the light speed attack, it goes crazy. Durability-wise, there are 2 paths. 2 paths you can walk down. Either A, Hikari is a pillow puncher who does no damage, which is supported by his 2 main fights where he's tickled Arume and tickled Kashimo. Or B, Hikari's stronger than Yuta, stated by Yuta himself, stated by external materials, hyped up by the narrative in terms of Hikari saying, you know, Gojo only said if he gets weaker than you and me, Gojo believes they're on the same level, all the stuff like that. And thusly, Yuta should be hitting as hard, or Hikari should be hitting as hard as Yuta hits. And thusly, Kashimo should be extremely durable. Same thing with Arume. You know what that means? It means Yuta should basically be doing no damage to Kashimo. If you think Hikari's actually stronger, or even relative to Yuta, based on how little damage Kashimo takes from Hikari. I'm interested to see how Restless Gambler takes it. Obviously, he's a Hikari fan. So if we go down that route, then Kashimo should bulk everything except the Durin Egg. But if we don't go down that route, it's bad for Kashimo's durability. Well, not necessarily bad, because notably, Kashimo only takes serious levels of damage from True Form Sukuna. And that's it. Like, Panda doesn't do any damage to him, Hakari barely does any damage to him, and Megane does nothing to him. So, like, Kashimo's a coin flip. Let's see.
When he fights Sukuna, he tanks his first barrage of physical attacks, but then he gets immediately cut by the world-cutting slash. Sukuna then blitzes and pummels Kashimo, making him bleed, then finishes him off by making him a waffle. This isn't an anti-feat because, again, everyone in the verse other than Gojo Satoru is dying to that. Finally, we enter hacks. Kashimo is a lightning guy, so his hacks consist of different lightning abilities. The first thing we find out is that Kashimo stuns people with his lightning curse energy trait in hand-to-hand combat. This is a form of durability negation that allows him to get the upper hand in battle. Then after, Kashimo is able to send lightning bolts at you after a couple of hits. He does it against Sukuna after 2 punches and 1 blast, but against Hakari, he has to let off a multitude of attacks before he could let it off. So it's safe to assume that when Kashimo enters his curse technique, the requirements lower down. In his curse technique, by the way, Kashimo can shoot blasts at you and it increases his speed many times over. With everything set in stone and both characters analyzed, who would win in a fight? Let's find out.
So he didn't start the Budokai music. I'm sorry, but so he didn't even go into the hypothetical Hikari to Yuta. He didn't mention it. I think he's giving this to Yuta. Once again, domain is enough usually, but like I can see arguments for Kashimo. Even the way he's scaled, I can see arguments for Kashimo. If you think he immediately goes to the Mythic Beast Amber and you think he's breathing down Yuta's throat, he should outspeed Yuta drastically if he's at all comparable to base Yuta while Kashimo's in base. And then Yuta's just not going to have the time to slide that ring on. He's not going to have the time to activate his domain because he's going to get beat down. And if the requirement really is as low as 3 hits or possibly just 2 hits to bolt, Yuta's not eating the bolt, and you think Yuta's not going to eat the bolt because of durability scaling or the bolt being a type of Durin Egg, then Yuta gets his arms blown off, then his head blown off, and then he's cooked. Or, if you think Yuta's bulky enough, he eats a few hits, domains, and then Kashimo loses. Domain is the win con. I think it's hard to argue Yuta gets a win con outside of domain, even with him and Rika teaming up because of how fast Kashimo's implied to be. But once again, it's
the perfect scenario for this fight would be when Kashimo tries to press Yuta in chapter 234. Let's imagine Yuta actually tries to go to Gojo and Kashimo meets him outside to stop him. From there, they will start. Same rules as always, whoever dies or gets knocked out first, loses. So let's go and simulate the fight. Play the Budokai music. The fight will start and Yuta and Kashimo would enter hand-to-hand combat. Kashimo's stunning attacks will be ignored because Yuta's curse energy pool is the second highest in the entire verse. Behind Kashimo appears a half-manifested Rika, and so Kashimo starts to get pressed. So he unleashes his curse technique. Now, this is where everything goes up to interpretation. In his Amber form, Kashimo would blitz Yuta multiple times over. I don't think anyone disagrees with this. So if Kashimo starts pressing Yuta before Yuta can get his domain off, there is a chance that Kashimo can win. This is because he'd be able to land heavy blows while avoiding some. He can also send lightning in that form with what seems to be less requirements, so a fast beating with a lightning bolt would definitely kill Yuta. However, it won't be that easy because of Yuta's endurance in RCT. For this reason, there can be a possibility for Yuta to get his ring on and open his domain expansion, and that's where everything takes a turn. In Yuta's domain, Sukuna had to use Hollow Wicker Basket to combat the sure hit effect of Jacob's Ladder. Kashimo is stated to have this ability, but that means Kashimo remains in this domain with his arms completely occupied. This isn't a good situation for Kashimo because he'd be left to fight with his blast that a nearly dying Sukuna was able to block and come out unscathed from. There's also implications that you need your mouth for Hollow Wicker Basket, and so if that's the case, Kashimo would have to fight with his feet. Yuta also has Charles' curse technique to see when a blast is coming to dodge accordingly. Then Icebreaker breaks Kashimo's guard, and he also has Cleave. This by itself would just be a slaughter from there on out. Yuta, and if he really wants it, a fully manifested Rika would bully Kashimo to death within the domain. If Kashimo lets go of Hollow Wicker Basket to use his hands against Yuta, he will in fact get caught by Rika, who's able to hold Sukuna in place while partially manifested. All of that would lead to Kashimo getting hit with Jacob's ladder. The damage it does doesn't matter here because the main thing is that his curse technique will turn off. In chapter 237, it's explained that because Kashimo's curse technique makes him surpass the limits of mankind, the moment Kashimo's technique runs out, his body will crumble. Having his curse technique turned off in the middle of it would just make the process faster, and Kashimo would literally die on the spot. So all in all, if Kashimo can f up Yuta outside of his domain, he can win with a combo and a couple of lightning bolts. But if there is an ever so slight chance that Yuta opens his domain, Kashimo has 0 win cons and he just dies on the spot. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Do make sure to subscribe. I mean, you got this far anyways.
You know, I have subscribed, I've liked the video, and yeah, I agree. It really comes down to how quickly does Kashimo activate CT, and how much faster do you think he is than Yuta and Rika? Because if you think he's drastically faster, like you think base Kashimo, Yuta and Rika are all relative in speed, and then CT Kashimo is like a, let's just say, a 2-time multiplier, then yeah, he would literally just beat the brakes off Yuta. And since the bolt only takes like 2 hits, maybe 3, that same like 3-piece combo he hit Panda with happens to Yuta. Yuta gets his brain blown out. Straight to the domer. His RCT is not as fast as Akari's. It's not as good as Gojo's or Sukuna's. Boom, his head explodes and he's done. Before Rika can do anything, before Yuta can do anything. But if that domain happens, he loses. Immediately. Because of Jacob's ladder. Even with Hollow Wicker Basket, right? The only hypothetical argument I could see for Kashimo in domain versus Yuta and Rika is the massive speed advantage. And he legit, like, kicks Yuta into bolt. Like, he strikes, like, he does that. But even then, that's kind of a meme argument. But once again, I'll go more in depth. I may ask, I'll see if I can ask someone for a collab on this one. This could be fun. Because I wouldn't mind defending Kashimo. I do actually want to, like, open a discourse and discussion on, like, CT Kashimo versus Yuta. Because it could be fun. It could be very, very fun. I don't know. We'll see about that. Is there anyone y'all would want to see me collab on that with? I would ask Gambler. If I could get in contact with Gambler. But, like, one, I'd have to get in contact with him, and 2, he'd already did the battle. So maybe that could be.
And I'll catch y'all
in depth in this whole video. But let me actually let the video play out a little bit more. All right, we made it to the end. All right, I'll let that video play out absolutely and completely once we're done here. But amazing video, W video. Man, y'all, that was so weak. Oh, because I have my headphones on. Was that weak? That was better. But yeah, W video. Very, very W video. Once again, I agree with the scaling. You can do meme arguments for, not necessarily meme arguments. There are arguments for Kashimo still beating Yuta. I think there are. I think they're just very hard to do, especially if you start going into super deep semantics about output and what the bolt is and how the bolt works and stuff like that, and whether Kashimo would even use CT on Yuta in character. There are so many different things you can go into. This is why it's the most fun battles to discuss. But I think Restless Gambler did a fantastic job with a fantastic video explaining it. But of course, the video is 20 minutes long. This video is over an hour long. So please make sure you check out the original video. There'll be a link in the description down below. Go leave a like. Go tell them Pencil sent you. I'm about to leave a comment. In fact, I'll leave my comment right now. Yeah. W video. My poor lightning goat. Bam. Comment added. Perfect. Beautiful. I love the like. I love the comment. Make sure you go leave a like and a comment on the original video. And if you could, leave a like and comment on this video. If you get all the way to the end, please leave blessed bolts, like lightning bolts. Leave blessed bolts in the comment section down below. And to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to hit that little notification bell so you not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do happen to have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as little as $1 a month. You get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks will include the live reactions of the very next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, ad-free variations of all my videos, and if you become a $25 patron or a $25 member, you can order whatever video you want. Also, if you want to do a one-time donation for your boy, or if you want to make a one-time video request, the link to my Ko-Fi is in the description down below. Now, to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is that guy with the pencil, writing off. I would like to give a thank you to our $3 members, so Connor Plays, Greyhound, Atkins Void, Astro, Eternal Flame, Querencia Atala, Red Wolf 4765, G Prosper, and Paris Arnold. And I'd like to give a thank you to our $5 patrons, Steron, Sean, Midnight Lord 21, Marcus, Kevin, and Igneel. And I'd like to give a big old thank you to our $7 members, Autumn Mornings Lazo and Sick Addiction. And I'd like to give a big old thank you to our $10 member, Robbie Uchiha. And I'd like to give a gargantuan thank you to our $10 patrons, Panda Goat, Joaquin, and Idemokami. And I'd like to give a gargantuan scrumdiddlyumptious thank you to our $25 patron, Chinadoll09. And I'd like to give another gargantuan gargantuan I have no idea what that word is. Thank you to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.